Hello and welcome to Spindle TV. My name is Laney Shaughnessy and I am going to be your host this evening. Hopefully you all are doing well and things are going good. Tonight we're going to continue my modeling challenge for myself to take an image that we've imported and turn it into a model. Now last week we got some vectors drawn and we got some of the models created, but we didn't get very far and it took a long time to do. I was a little disappointed in by the end of that video, I was a little disappointed in the results or as how far the progress was and everything. And at the end of it, I ran into a complication with the little loop-de-loop on the vines. This week while I was away, from you guys and girls, I went back and revisited that design and I looked at it and analyzed it and tried to figure out, what the problem was, and ended up ultimately figuring out the problem that in the moment I didn't realize. It didn't click in my head, and I'm going to show you what that is, and then we're going to finish up this modeling. We're going to go through the steps and things and get this done, and hopefully in a short order of time. I want to thank everybody for joining me, and with that being said, let's go ahead and jump back over into the software and take a look at where we left off and what we're doing now. I believe camera 2 is the software. Go. And let me get me down in the bottom left corner here. All right. I think we're good. Looking at my TV screen over to the right, I believe everything is good there. All right. Well, thanks for joining me again. Like I said, last week we didn't get very far. Basically, for those of you that are just joining me this week and didn't get to see last week, my challenge for myself was to take an image such as this image exactly, and turn it into a model or make a model emulating this image. I really like this image and everything, and it appealed to me, and I wanted to see if I can turn it into a model by using the Aspire software and making some of the model components and everything. Last week we used tools in the Vectric software like the one-rail sweep. A lot of you asked, hey, why redraw all the vectors if you're going to just use the Centerline sweep tool? And that was a valid question. My answer to that is I wanted to redraw the vectors so I have those outlines, but also it kind of gave me a better visual as to where I needed my center lines and everything to create my parts. Now, going into the design area here, let's go in and turn off a couple of layers and stuff, and let's turn on the outline, the grapes. Got to remember all my layers now. Center lines. Okay. So if we come in here and look at, and let's turn off the grapes for right now and the vines themselves and just look at the center line. We ended up creating this center line vector to have our profiles, and we only had, last week we only had about 3 profiles and stuff, but to take our profiles and sweep them along so they create kind of this twist around the part. Well, when I had it as one complete entire center line, my twist down here in the model was not acting right, and I should have known that, but in the moment it did not click in my mind, And in the moment, I didn't realize, you know, in the tool that I'm using, that the weave pattern, it creates an over under in that order. You know, whatever direction is traveling, it's going to go over, under, all the way around. And I can't get away from that. So the model wasn't creating correctly. It wasn't doing right and everything. If we go and look at the 3D view, let's close this for a minute and let's turn off this and this. Let's turn off this and this. Let's turn on that and that. And so in the 3D view, let me turn off that leaf there. And let's turn off component 1. And there's one more I got to turn off. Bear with me a second. I got to find it here. That here. When we, you know, left off, we got about this far. And what I didn't realize was, you know, I should have just read the tool that I was using and everything. And the weave tool creates an over, under pattern. And by doing that, I wanted in the image, it was an under, then an over, under, and everything. If we go back and look at the photo, this vine was traveling under this loop, under the main vine, and then going over and over again, and then under, over. Well, I was trying to emulate that the best that I could, but I couldn't with that tool. And that's how we left off. We left off last week with that. And so I have to kind of take it for what it is. It's an over-under kind of pattern. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up coming in and creating more profiles to sweep along my rails, my centerline basically. And I also ended up, let's turn off this model here. I ended up separating the vectors. The loop is by itself, and this section right here is by itself, these two intersecting lines. And then the rest of this design, you know, the rest of this loop here and the rest of this loop here, because of the intersection right here, those are two separate lines. And what I ended up doing was on that center line sweep, if I select these two lines, my start point is at the beginning of the line here and at the beginning of the line here. I ended up going into that center rail sweep tool and using that selection. Okay, so those two selections, I ended up cutting them short. And now, because of the thickness and how thin it gets when it comes to the point at the end, I needed my main vine to take on different thicknesses as well, the main line coming through here. So that prompted me to create additional vectors. And you'll notice that some of these vectors are reduced down in size. And so I can, you know, select my first point and click where I want that point to be. And then I can select my next point and come up here to the end of that line on this next cross section area here and click there where I want that to end. Okay. Now I can come over and select, you know, my first point of this loop line here, which is going to be here, and then come in and select my smaller vector and have it end here. And by doing that and then using this pattern, using the scale shape option, sweeping, you know, along the spans and using the scale shape, I went with a 30 instead of a 40. Now, you guys from last week and the weeks before, you know, we were doing 40, 60 and all that stuff. And so I ended up going with a 30. Now this number here really isn't relevant now. I realized that also in understanding the tool a little bit better. But you know, I was going 40, 60. I was typing the number in, and when we click apply, it was popping back to 100. Well, that number, the Z over, really doesn't come into effect unless we do an add base option instead of a scale shape. The under automatically subtracts from 100%. So if I'm using 30, then it's going to be 70. It's going to be 30, 70 and everything. So I don't necessarily need to type the 70 in there like I was doing. And in creating that shape in that sweep and everything, I'm able to, if we go into the, let's close this tool now, and let me turn everything off except for the shape that I just created. If we go into the 3D view, that gives me that vine loop here. And if we look at it from the side, those two different heights, you know, will shrink down so that my thin part can be over the you know, over the top without having to add a lot of base height to it. But I'm still getting, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm getting the over pass here, the under. As it comes around, it goes over, then under, over the next one and under, over the next one and under, all the way around that over-under pattern, and ultimately ending up with an over here, which is what I want. And so I got to live with that. And I'm fine with living with that. It still gives me that loop-to-loop kind of look. It's not exactly like the photo, but hey, varying from the photo is okay because we're just using the photo as a guide, as inspiration, as, you know, a muse, if you will, to create our shapes. Now, once these two shapes were created here, I had to then, let's go and turn off the grain for a minute. And let's create a new layer. I had to go in and create these final two shapes here. But what's important is where those shapes interact. If you notice my line, if I can zoom in, my line goes past the other line by a bit, you know, and it's not even in line with each other. They're off a little, and that's fine. But it overextends the end of that line. It doesn't meet right in the middle. So that way the two models end up merging together properly. Same thing over here. We have our two lines, and I have this one meeting instead of overlapping because there's no gap between it, and it will merge properly because of the size that's there. It's a little bit fatter and everything. So on these two, going into that Centerline sweep tool, I needed to make sure that my start points, you know, the wider area here ends up, and there it's the same size at this end when it ends here as what this piece was. Over here, same thing. When it starts here, it needs to end up at the same size as this piece. So I got to use the same vectors, the same cross sections. So this first cross section here was this one, was this shape. So I've got to use that one here, and it's going to start here. It's going to come around, and on this one, it's going to use that flatter shape that I used on the other one, which is this one here, and that's going to end there. Over here at the beginning, I could have whatever size, you know, vine that I want, And I'll go ahead and just use this one here. It'll start there. And as it comes around and meets, it has to use the same vector that I started with over there, which was this other one that was kind of flattened out, which is this one here. And it's going to connect down to here. So selecting that cross section. And so when I create that shape again with that 30 under, you know, I can merge these two and click apply to create that shape, and in my part it should create a seamless seam here where those two lines meet, as well as down here where those two lines meet, which it does. Okay. So that's ultimately how I ended up, you know, finally getting the main vine and that little curlicue to blend. Okay. All right. And so that ended up creating that shape. Okay. Then from there, I needed to now start to work on the other areas. Now bear with me just a second while I turn on my grain layer for a minute. And on my grain layer, I need to take these two models, this model here. Let's close this tool. Close the tool. I need to take this model here and that one there, yep. And then I'm going to move to layer. I'm going to move it to that layer 2. So that way I can turn that grain back off and my models are still intact. Okay. So ultimately that's how I was able to create that centerpiece, you know, to that vine. Now, in my other models, we had earlier, you know, at last week's show, we already created the vine ends, which if we go into the, let me find the layer that was on right here. We created these vine ends, but when I created them, I created all three of them together. I selected all three of the vectors. Number 1, 2, and 3 over here at this little leaf outline, which we'll get rid of in a minute. Let's turn our bitmap layer off for a second. 1, 2, and 3, I created them as one item, one model, not separate models. And I need to go back and recreate them separately as 3 separate models because I need to be able to do a tilt on this model over here, on this component, but not the others. So if I try to tilt or fade the models now, it would tilt and fade all 3 of these as treating it as one item, and I need them separate. So we're going to come in and we're going to turn this vine ends off, and I'm going to recreate these models. So we're going to do one at a time. So I'm going to come over here and into the Create Shape tool. It's going to be a curved shape. I'm going to go probably with a 60-degree kind of curve, you know, 60-degree arch. No limit on that, and I'm going to click merge on this and create that shape for that one. Okay. And then I'm going to start a new component. I'm going to select this next vector, keeping the same settings and everything. I'm going to click apply to create that second shape. I'm going to start a new component. And then on this one that's out here by itself, I'm going to keep the same settings, click apply, and create that third shape. So now we have these three individual shapes here. And notice how this shape here is blending in with the main vine. I need it to tilt. I need it to be kind of resting above. That's why I needed it as a separate vector. Okay. And so let's answer a quick question before we go on. How do we get the black background in the 3D view? In your edit software under options, you have your shaded background style. That shaded background by default is a gradient. It could be a solid color, a gradient, or an image. You can actually put an image back in the background. Simply change it to solid and then change the background color and the gradient color to black, right? Or whatever color you want it to be. Okay, it's in the options there. All right, so hopefully that answered your question, Chris. All right, so closing out of this tool now, on this shape here, which is going to be for me component 8, that component, I'm going to double click on it. And when I get let's get into a straight on view here and let's zoom into this. Let's focus in on this model here. When I'm in transform mode, by double clicking on them in transform mode, there's a blue square at the bottom here. If I click on that blue square, it's going to open up the properties window for that model. Okay. And what I want to do is I want to tilt this model. I want to tilt this up a little bit. Now when you tilt, you have two options. When you're setting your tilt, you have 2 clicks. And you'll get this anchor with a number 1 next to it. And where you click first is going to be, imagine a wedge going under your part. Okay, your wedge is going under the part, causing that part to tilt up. The first place you click is going to be the thin part of the wedge. The second place you click is going to be the thick part of the wedge. So for me, my first part is I'm going to put the thin part of the wedge down here because I need to raise this side up. So that'll be the thicker part of that wedge. So I'm going to click over here on my model, and now you'll see that anchor gets a number 2 next to it. I'm going to move over here and click my second time. And it always does this. It always tilts the board when we do that. I don't know why. It's just a little thing in the software. But now I can come in and use my little drop down box and I can change the angle of that tilt. And so all I want to do is I want to tilt it up so that it is basically sitting on top of that vine. Okay. Now if I turn this sideways, I want to make sure that I'm not tilting too much, just enough, to be above the vine. I may be able to bring this down a little bit. Let's go at 2.4. And what I don't want is I don't want to lose a whole lot of that model in there. I want at least part of the shape height above that shape. And I'm just a little low. I want a little bit more of the shape here to be above, so I will go back up to the 2.6 and raise that up just a little bit. Okay, so now I have tilted that so it's kind of got that where it's resting over. Okay, so we tilted. All right, and now on this part here, I've got one more piece which was the curly Q over here at the top. If I turn that back on, we created that last week. That's this little curly Q here. Now number 1 is I need this curly Q to be not an add. I need it to be a merge. Right now it's adding, and that's why it's kind of taking on the shape of what is underneath it. I need it to merge with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it up to my level that I'm working in right now. And I'm going to change the combine mode to merge. And then again, I need to do a little bit of a tilt. I'm kind of sinking down in the vine here, so I need to do a tilt on this one. So I'm going to, again, double click on it and click on the blue box down here to get the properties. I'm gonna check tilt and hit set. And I want the thin part of the wedge on this end of the model and the thick part of the wedge on this end of the model. And then I just want a little bit of a tilt, not much, just to bring this part up over the vine. And I don't need to go that high. Let's bring that down a little bit. About there. Now, in this model here, in this end, we're going to be doing some sculpting in a minute to blend these two parts together. But I may be able to do a bit of a fade to where the model will fade out as it approaches this, kind of reducing this height here and fading it into this other component. Let's find out. So once again, I'm going to check the fade box and I'm going to hit set. Now on the fade, your model where you click first, that's going to be the area that it's going to keep or be at its strongest, look. And then the second place we click is where it's going to start to fade away or disappear. So I want to keep this area up at the top, so that's going to be my first click. And down here towards the bottom, I'm going to go past it a little bit, is where my second click is going to be. And by default, it's set to a 50% fade. So as it comes around, it's fading. So let's look at see what this does, what this fading does. As I increase the percentage, as that model comes around, it's slowly reducing itself and fading away into the other component. And of course, don't drag the model like I just did. So let me hit Control Z to undo. There we go. And now I need to do a little bit of a rotate on this part. So I'm going to take it and rotate it ever so slightly. And that'll be good there. And then I will go into sculpting and I'll clean up the rest of this here and kind of blend these two parts together. Okay. So we're kind of fading into that. So I've got two things that I need to blend together. This vine here has got to blend into this main vine here. And then this one needs to blend in up here. So these two components, or three components, well actually technically these two components, this one here, and then my main components here, I'm going to end up baking them together because I've got to go into sculpting, and if I'm sculpting more than one model, it has to be baked together as one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to turn off any of the models that I do not want to bake into. It's like taking eggs, flour, water, whatever, baking it, blending it together to make dough and all that stuff, and then baking it into bread, right? So individual ingredients. So I'm going to turn off whatever ingredients I don't want to bake. That one has to stay on because it's part of that model. This one I'm going to turn off. Number 9 is going to stay on. So yep, number 9 is going to stay on. Number 10 is going to stay off. Okay, so these components are now going to get baked together as one model. Now, if you want to keep your components separate or keep your originals intact in case you need to go back and change something, then add a new level, insert a new level, and copy these 3 models, or 4 models, should I say, up into that level, duplicate them. For instance, if I hold down my control key, I can select those 4 components. And I can hold down my control key and drag them up into that new level, essentially duplicating them. And then I can turn them off in the level below and keep those originals intact and separated in case I need to change something, right? Because once I bake those models together, that's it. It's done. You know, it's one model now and everything. And so on those components, now I have a level 5 here, these individual components here. I'm going to select all of them. I'm going to bake them together as one model. And then I'm going to go up into the sculpting tool with that baked component selected. I'm going to go up into the sculpting tool so I can start kind of sculpting and blending. Before we start sculpting and blending and everything, let's answer another question. When you use the fade setting, you can do the same thing sides or any way you want to go, correct? Yes. So I can go top to bottom, side to side, diagonal, whatever direction. Wherever I click first and wherever I click second, whatever direction, it's going to fade in that direction of my 2 clicks. If I'm tilting, the first place I click is the thin part of the wedge. The second place I click is the thicker part of the wedge. Wherever I click, that's where that wedge is going to get stuck in, right? So you can go side to side, top to bottom, diagonal, whatever direction you need to go. Okay, cool. So now, in order to manipulate or move my view around, it's called twiddle. Twiddling your view. So I'm in a tool right now. I'm in the smoothing tool, and I can't spin or tilt or rotate my board or zoom in or zoom out unless I'm in twiddle mode. Like twiddling your thumbs. And now I can come in and you know, turn things and all that stuff that I want to do. So I want to focus up here first. So I'm going to twiddle my view so I have, you know, a good view here. And now that I'm in the view that I want, and notice the pixelation I have in my model, guys and girls. That's because when I created these models, I did not change the resolution. When I set up the job, I didn't hold the shift key down, and I didn't change to like an extremely high resolution. So my model's pixelated when you zoom into it and everything. I'm a little too far into the project. I can't go back. I don't have those options anymore. I'd have to copy all my vectors over into another project and all that stuff. So understand that I'm working in a very low resolution. It says very high, but when it comes to modeling, it's a low resolution. So when I zoom in and things like that, it's going to be a little pixelated. So sorry about that. Okay, let's go back to our sculpting tool. Excuse me. And let's go back to twiddle our view. And let's get back over where we were. Okay. So back here now, I want to use the Smudge tool, and it's basically just like you're smearing a component. You're smearing it in whatever direction you decide to smudge. And in this case, that purple dot you see on the screen, that's my brush. I need to reduce that brush size down. I don't want to be so big. I want to be small. And wherever I smudge, I'm basically pulling material from the model into the other model. So I'm smudging those two things together. I am essentially blending those two parts. So it looks like the vine is, you know, they're growing out of, you know, into one another and things. Now here, in this area here, I have a void. Let's twiddle the view again. And I'm going to end up undoing that. We're going to redo it here in a minute because I don't like the way that smudged. But I have a void right here. And so that void when I smudge, it's not going to blend in down here like I want. I got to add some material there. But first, I'm going to take my undo brush and I'm going to wipe over what I just did to undo it to get back to the original what I was at. All right, let's take and add, let's deposit some material. Let me get my brush down to an appropriate size. Let's deposit some material here and kind of try to build up the best that I can. But where that void is, it's not going to add material there. You know, it just isn't. I'm going to remove some of this material here to kind of get rid of that that little overlap. Okay, now that I've gotten rid of it, I can blend this a little bit better. I'm going to take my undo brush and I'm just going to rub over this area because I didn't want to remove that material there. Okay, and now I'm going to take my smudge brush and I'm just going to kind of pull this into one another and kind of blend it. Then I need to smooth this out some. And if we go, let's go back to twiddle our view. If we go back into our view here and come in at the front so I can see it a little bit better from this direction, you can see it's starting to blend a little bit better. Let's go in and let's do a little bit more smudging, and right in here I just want to kind of pull this down a bit, and then over here on this thicker part I want to kind of pull that in to this area up here. And this is difficult to do with a mouse. Now I typically will use my drawing pad that has a kind of a pen and stuff, and it's just like art sculpting. You know, I can use that pen with my drawing tablet, my art tablet, my computerized art tablet screen, and it's a little easier. With a mouse, it's kind of difficult. You know, it's not, you don't have, it doesn't feel natural, right? It doesn't feel natural in that movement and stuff, but it is what it is, and we're just dealing with it. Let's remove a little bit more of this material over here. And then I'm going to take my smoothing brush, and of course, you know, your strength, how much smoothing you do, your smoothness and everything, you can adjust those areas here, and all, so that, you know, you can get the right tone that you want. Okay, and all I want to do is just kind of smooth that out some. Okay, so I'm just kind of smoothing this out a little bit. And so if we go back to twiddle our view, it almost looks like glass reflection here, you know, when we're in this view and everything. But let's zoom out a bit and go into our Z view. You can see that, you know, the vine is kind of coming in much better. You know, it looks like it's part of it. Okay. Before we go on to the next one, let me answer another question. Lainey, can you adjust the preview simulation quality under the toolpath tab at this point? Well, under toolpath, the preview simulation quality, this is for a toolpath preview. Okay, we are not doing a toolpath preview right now. We are in the 3D tab, in the modeling portion of the 3D tab. So this tool or this setting has nothing to do with that. This setting is, bear with me a second. Do you really want to discard all your changes? No, I don't. This quality here is changed by the job setup, but I'm already too far in. The job setup has to be set right at the beginning. The resolution quality has to be set right at the beginning when creating the job in order for it to be effect, and then any model we create is going to be created in that resolution. I can't even go back and change this, to try to improve the quality of this model at this point without starting over, without taking all the vectors I've drawn and created, saving them as a DXF or what have you, and opening them up or importing them into a new design that has been set up with that higher resolution, and then start rebuilding all my models again, right? So, and I'm not going to do that. We're not going to waste that kind of time. Now, we're still in our twiddle our view, and we're going to come over here, and we've got this model to contend with. This vine here. Once again, I have a bit of a gap right here, and that gap, I cannot really fill in that gap to spread it, and I also don't want to remove this. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and click OK to finish up that first bit of sculpting. And now that I'm back into my normal window, I'm going to select this. I've already baked it together, so I can't rotate that. Arc. Okay, I'll just have to go back in and deal with it in the. I'll just have to deal with it in the sculpting. But I should have rotated that part just a little bit to get that in to merge into the model, but that's okay. Let's go in here and twiddle our view. Now, by the way, if I am in a tool like the smooth or smudge or deposit and everything, if you have a roller wheel on your mouse, you can push that middle wheel down and it will take it temporarily out of the sculpting that we're doing and put it in a twiddle view. And so we can at least kind of maneuver around side to side. We can pan. Can't really rotate and stuff. Let's go ahead and twiddle this a little bit. Come over to about here. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is let's try to deposit some material in here. So I'm going to try to build this up a bit, and then I'm going to take and smudge that material, kind of basically smudge into here. I'll fix this in just a minute with the undo brush, but I'm just kind of smudging this in, blending that in. I'm going to take my remove, and I'm going to try to remove some of this material right here. And again, a little difficult to do. In this, kind of view here. Just try to remove some of that. All right, now I'm going to take my deposit here, and I'm going to try to build some of this up a little bit. I'll take my undo brush and kind of undo just in this area to get it, somewhat back to its normal state. Okay, and then I'm going to take my smoothing tool and try to smooth this out some. Okay. Now if I twiddle this view, love that term. and tilt it a little bit. Oh, not that far. Sorry. I want to build up a little bit more material right here in these little divots, so I'm going to deposit some material in these areas here. And then I'm going to take my smoothing brush and try to smooth that out a little bit more to build that area up. Okay, let's get back into kind of a front view here. And I've got this deposited area kind of down here. I'm not really worried about that, but if I were, I could try to use my remove brush and try to remove some of that. Let's turn the strength up a little higher. And we'll go ahead and, at that point, that's about as best I can do it now. I'll click OK. And coming back into this, you see we have some of this material, you know, that's been underneath here. It's kind of been, you know, as I created it, it kind of pushed it down. The component, what I want to do is I want to remove all of that stuff that's below that zero plane, all that meat right there that's underneath that was created. So I'm going to use a tool here called replace value below with zero plane, and I want it to be transparent. And I want to go ahead and apply that. To get rid of all that stuff that's underneath it. Okay. So I replaced the value that was below zero, zero being the bottom of my model. I replaced it with a transparency. I want to get rid of all that stuff that was created by that sculpting tool and apply that, right, to get rid of all that underlying stuff. Okay. All right, let's close that tool. And so now we have our vine where our two parts here are kind of, you know, now blending into it. Still a little rough right there. I probably could have smoothed that a little bit more. It's a little chunky right there in this area and all. But I'm going to be okay with that for now. Okay. All right. So now that we come in, now that we have this component created, now I can start to work on the other components. First thing I'm going to do is I'll go ahead and on my level 4 here, I'm going to go ahead and turn back on component number 10, which is this piece over here, as well as component number 8, which was this piece over here. And notice on component 8, notice how it's in an add mode, not a merge. That's because the new level I created, the level, the combine mode is add. It's adding to whatever levels are underneath it. So I need to merge that level with whatever's underneath it. Okay, so I get back to that state there. Okay. Cool. All right. So we've got these components in the vines. The only thing remaining left is the leaf and the grapes. Now let's talk about the leaf and the grapes for a minute, because that leaf was a nightmare for me. First thing I had to do, and let's turn on the leaf vector, right? This vector here. First thing that I needed to do is, because I have to be able to create a component of this, and all of these vectors are created together. They're just one continuous, lines and everything on these shapes. And I needed just the outline of the leaf to create my original component. So I ended up having to take the photo over to Photoshop, and I had to paint in this leaf to be able to create a nice traceable image. If we look at that image, the bitmap layer, that's basically, I had to take the leaf in Photoshop and I had to paint it in. You see how I have it painted in black? I had to do the whole thing, paint it in, in the main body of the leaf area, so that I end up with a outline such as this. And let me take this image here and move it over here for a minute, and let's zoom into it. I had to create that shape so that I could go into the trace tool and I could trace this image to create a vector outline. So if I turn off the bitmap image again, I now have this vector outline. This vector outline could then be moved over and sized up to be the same scale as the other leaf. And once I had that, I could then come in and turn off my leaf vector where I have this outline, this tracing. Okay? Guys still with me? All right. And in this vector, I needed to get rid of some trash. There was a couple of pieces of trash, so I would ungroup that, and I would come in and delete these little specks of trash that I didn't want. There was one over here and one down here. And then I wanted to clean up the vectors on this right here, so I went into node editing mode on this and basically selected, oops, don't do that. Selected these points here and hit the D on my keyboard to delete them. Turn that into a Bezier curve and kind of round that back out a bit. Let's delete this point too as well, and this point as well. Okay, to clean that up some. Down here, same situation, selecting these points here, hitting the letter D on the keyboard to delete them, also deleting that one point there, and then turning this into a Bezier curve so that I could, kind of round it as well. Cleaning up. I didn't really worry about the rest of this over here. It was just those two bad areas I wanted to clean up. Now from here, I needed to be able to create a model shape, and I needed to use the 2-rail sweep. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to turn this layer off for a minute, as well as my centerline layer, as well as my trim and draw. So I'm back at a blank board, and I'm going to come into this leaf vector and this layer 1 right here. The grapes is on that layer So just we'll have to deal with that. But all I'm concerned about at this point is, let's turn that off, this layer 1 here. All I'm concerned about at this point are these two wiggly lines. Let's get out of node editing mode, this one here and this one here. Basically, these are my drive rails. And the reason why they're wiggly and they're not straight or whatever is I needed my model, the profile that I was going to sweep across that model, I wanted it to have some variation. And the model is going to size up and down in thickness. It's going to scale the Z height based on how far apart those lines are, how close they are, and all that stuff. So in the 2-rail sweep tool, let me get into my modeling tab and make sure I'm in level 5 here. In the 2-rail sweep tool, I took these two lines, this one here and this one here, and that is my drive rails. And make sure they're both going in the same direction. And then this is the profile I created. I just created a random kind of profile shape. So it would, I want a little bit higher in the center of this leaf and a little lower in the bottom and everything. So I just created just this random shape here. It could be whatever you want it to be. But that is going to be the shape that is going to be scaled with the cross sections. That is going to scale it to its width of those cross sections. And it's going to sweep that profile between those two spans. And when we click apply to create that shape, in our, let's close that now, in our model here, let's turn off our vines for a minute, as well as our other two models. And if we look in the 3D view, you see this kind of shape that we have here that was created. It's kind of got different heights and levels and slight curve to it and everything. Now I'm going to take the actual profile of the leaf and I'm going to select that model. And I'm going to clear the area of the selected component, the selected model, that is outside of the selected vector. So by doing that, it removes everything that's outside of that selected vector, leaving me with this leaf pattern here. Okay. Now in this leaf pattern, you know, I could add the veins to it and everything. I could, you know, use some texturing. I could go into sculpting and kind of rough it up and things like that. But no matter what I did, I honestly was not satisfied with the results. And I thought there's got to be another way that I can create this. And I'm going to go ahead and put the veins on and all that stuff, and I'm going to show you the result and stuff and show you just kind of what I'm not happy with. But before we do that, let's go over and see. Let me check and see if there's, you guys and girls are having a conversation. Let me just make sure that Harvey, my oh damn, Harvey, I know how to pronounce your last name, but I'm not doing it right now. Mattias? So if you plan on doing a lot of modeling, could you make a template with modeling resolution set to maximum? Yes, you could. In version 10.5, your job setup, whatever you have in your job setup and your material size and all that, when you save that project, you can save it as a template to use, and it should maintain or keep that template, those settings. Let's see here. Chris Leach, Laney, can you adjust the preview? Okay, we already answered that question. No, we can't preview the simulation quality at this point. Let's see here. let's go down. Using Inkscape, you can trace bitmaps and thresholds pretty easy. I use it to help. Yeah, Inkscape is a free photo editing software that you can use to create vectors and different things like that. Absolutely, that is Inkscape. I've used it in the past. I ended up getting the Adobe Cloud subscription. I think it's $69 a month or something like that. That gives me Premiere and Adobe and Illustrator and all that stuff. And so I use Photoshop mostly now, because most of the companies I work with that do my when I do video editing or when I'm transferring files back and forth, they use Adobe. So I got to keep up with them. All right, suicide at all times. Is the profile or the rails editable proactive? So yes, when we are active, and what I'm assuming what he's asking about that is, once we create the shape, can we change, can we do some thing and everything? And so yes, let's come in and turn this model off for a minute, and we'll do this again. Let's create this and this. Go into our 2-rail sweep tool, use it as our selection. Create this profile and sweep it across. And so as far as can it be edited proactive, meaning if I want to change that shape, can I come in and change my rails or my profile? Yes. On my profile here, I can hit the letter N on the keyboard to go into node editing, and I can adjust that shape, you know, accordingly, however I may want it to be, and things depending on, you know, what it is. And I can reapply that model and sweep that new change, you know, across. In my cross sections, on my cross sections, I have to hit node editing first and then select them, and then I can go in and change them or adjust them if I need be as well. So if your question is, can you change them proactive, if you mean while you're in the middle of all this, the answer is yes. Okay. Okay. So coming back to our leaf model here. I mean, it's a nice looking shape and everything. Could use probably some texturing, a little bit of smudging and kind of, you know, blending and all that stuff. But let's go ahead and look at the leaf, that leaf with some veins in it and stuff. That same component with the veins and everything in it. Not bad, but I just really wasn't happy with it. If I take that model and let's say I smooth it out some, kind of to smooth and soften up the edges a bit. Let's back it off some. I can, you know, get a little bit better, you know, looking leaf in that aspect, depending on how much, you know, smoothing I do. I don't want the veins to be too bulgy on the leaf veins, but, you know, and also don't want them to be too light and everything. So, you know, finding that happy medium and all would be kind of, you know, probably for me somewhere right about here. Or here to create this shape. And when I had this shape, or when I've got this shape here, and basically all I did was select the veins and use the create shape tool to I think I went 70 degrees just to create those veins and everything. But I kind of, you know, I looked at it and I wasn't totally satisfied with the way that looked. Now, if we turn on our other component, which is our vine and everything, it's not too bad. And all. Of course, I have to move the model back a little bit. So let me select this and move this back and over a little. Oh, not wrong direction. Hold on a minute. Okay. Oh, Laney, come on now. We'll get there, eventually. All right, good enough. And of course, now I can see it from the front here. Let's move that back to there. Okay. This vine, you know, is coming in there, so I'd have to do a little bit, maybe a little bit of fading or something, or a little bit of blending to get that vine to kind of come up into this. And all to give it kind of a little bit of realism, because right now it's, you know, quite a bit higher here in the back. But I still wasn't happy with the leaf. It just didn't have the shape that I wanted. Of course, I can go back and I can add more shape height and things to it. You know, I've already got that component baked together, but I could go in and add some more shape height, you know, and all that stuff. But I had to give it some base height so it stood above the vine and everything, so it overlapped the vine. And don't drag the model around, Laney. Undo. And I wasn't happy with it. So I said, okay, what alternatives do I have in my software? What alternatives do I have of something that may look better or may not look better as far as a leaf is concerned? And so I ultimately went into my clip art under plants and fruit, and I said, okay, what do I have that kind of has that leaf look to it? You know, I've got a maple leaf here. It's not necessarily a grape leaf, right? It's more of a maple leaf. It's not a grapevine leaf. And ultimately ended up with this model here that had a grapevine leaf with some grapes on it. And let's bring that over here and go into the 3D view for a minute. And look at that. And I said, well, you know, I could take my existing leaf into my sculpting tool and I could do some depositing and some smudging and smearing and you know, things like that. And I could turn my existing leaf that I created into something that looks like this. And I've kind of, this to me appealed a little bit better. I liked it a little bit more and everything without the grapes, of course. So I thought, okay, I just want that leaf. So I need to split this model apart. So in Aspire, I have in my modeling tools, I have a split tool where I can split two models apart. And so what I needed to do was come over in here and I needed to go into my trace bitmap tool. And I needed to adjust my sculpting or my threshold here till I got an outline of that leaf, if you will. And let's go right about there. And I needed to trace that to create those vectors. And then once I had those vectors, I needed to come in and clean them up a bit. So Let's go into, let's close this. And let's go into the ungroup tool to ungroup these vectors. And I'm going to take this vector here, right about here, and I'm going to go into node editing, and I'm going to cut the vector right here. And actually, let me retrace that. Let's get out of node editing for a minute. Let me retrace that and get a little bit better outline on that trace. So let's go back into here, go back into the trace tool, and let me get my threshold a little bit better. I want to get on the outside of that line a little bit more, and that's good. Now let's go into node editing. Let's ungroup this, go into node editing, cut the vector here, come all the way over to this side, and cut the vector here, and then go out of node editing mode, deselect this vector that I just cut, which it didn't cut on that side. I'll clean it up again. But delete everything else. Hit delete, get rid of everything. Let's go back in there and let's cut that again. Cut the vector there. And on the other side, we'll cut it here. Get out of node editing mode and delete this section here all the way around, so I have this one single line, this one single path. Now on this line, I want to go into node editing mode, and I want to delete this point here, and this point here, to get it back on that outline. Same thing over here. I'm going to select all of these points and hit D on my keyboard to delete them. Delete that point and that point and that point to kind of get on that leaf a little bit better. Basically, I'm getting rid of all the grape outlines that were there, right? Delete that point, this one, and turn that in a little bit. Coming all the way around, I need these nodes here. I'm going to actually delete those. And I'm going to drag this point over past my line right here. And drag this one up to there. Drag this out a little bit. Just to somewhat get that outline. I'm going to come all the way over to the other side here. I'm going to take and delete this point. Pull this over past this line here. And let's add a point. Pull that down. Come in right about there. And that'll be good with that. So now I have this dividing line between my leaf and the grapes. And I want to go ahead and split this model. So I'm going to select the component. I'm going to select that vector, and I'm going to split it into two halves. And it's going to bake all those little grapes and everything together first, and then it'll split it. Okay. So now notice up here, this tail up here, well, my line right there was pointing at that tail. So if that line was extended straight up, it would have cut it right here. And that's fine, because I'm going to end up creating another vector right here and cutting it off on the back here as well. So I've got this split into two parts. I have the part A, which is the leaf, and part B, which is the grapes and that other vine. So on part B, I'm just going to actually delete that because I don't need it. Now up here on the stem, I'm going to draw another vector, and I'll just use my curve tool here. And I'm going to just draw a line from there to there. And let's kind of bring this in a little bit. And then I'm going to select that model. Oh, get out of node editing first. I'm going to select that model and that vector, and I'm going to split it there as well. And again, I have part AA, which is the leaf, and part AB, which is the stem. I'm going to go ahead and delete part AB because I don't need it. Okay. So now I can delete the trimming vectors that I had, and ultimately now I have just the leaf, right? So I was able to cut out the part of the model that I wanted. And so I said, okay, now knowing that, let's take that model over here, size it up, get it into position, do a little bit of a rotate. A little bit more. Right about there. And ultimately come in, and that model needs to be a merge, not an add. It needs to merge with the other model. So I have, you know, kind of this, oops, damn it. Don't drag your model around. Let's bring that back. And now this model stands about 1 inch tall, which I don't want. The leaf, if we look at it from the side, it's quite tall. So we're going to go into the properties of this, and I'm going to reduce it down in size. In my shape height. Bring that down. Okay. And that was a little too low. Let's go 0.75. I'm going to build the body back up on that leaf. Oops, hold on. 0.75, not 75, 0.75. Just made it 75 inches tall. Let that regenerate. There we go. But all of this underlying meat, this heavier meat, the base height, that's the straight meat underneath, I can eliminate some of that. I can keep my shape height. My shape height is the smooth area up here. My base height is the meat that's underneath it. I'm going to reduce some of the base height so I can increase the shape height a little bit. And so I'm going to use, on that selected component there, I'm going to use the replace value with Z again. Now this time I need to be whatever under a certain height from the top down, anything below that is going to get removed. So I'm going to, let's go with a 1/2 inch, and I want to replace it with the transparency, and I want to lower the model by that value, and I'm going to click apply, and it should reduce some of that base. Okay, well, a 1/2 inch was too much. A 1/2 inch was too much. So let's go under a 1/4. Let's click apply on that. Let's do that again. Well, first of all, you have to undo what you did. Undo, undo. All right, let's try that again. Let's go ahead and click apply. Okay, and that'll be good. But now I need to do a little bit of a tilt, because I want this to be above the vine on this side. So I'm going to, again, let's get into straight on view here. I'm going to double click on this and click on that blue box to get into the properties. I'm going to tilt this and hit set. Thin part of the wedge over here. Thick part of the wedge over here. And then I'm going to adjust my tilt height. To bring that up. Okay. So I end up with a model like this. Now, we might like the other leaf versus this leaf or whatever. In my personal opinion, I like this leaf, but it all depends. Now, we could have taken our other leaf, if I turn that one off and turn the other one on. I could take in that leaf into sculpting mode, and I could start, sculpting and blending and, trying to get it to have a little bit more of an organic feel to it and shape and stuff. If I turn off all the other models and I close out of that tool and go into sculpting, in my sculpting, I could start to, I could start to change a little bit of, the shape, pushing and pulling and, what have you, getting different textures. But as I'm pulling and changing the shapes and everything, I'm changing the veins, right? So if I were to do this, I would need to do just the leaf as an unbaked component before I put the veins on it. Then it would probably be better for me to go through and start texturing and pushing and pulling and things, and then add the veins back to that, right? Add the veins back to that and stuff. But if I do it as a baked component with the veins, when I'm trying to, manipulate this, then I'm just ultimately, changing the veins, right? All I'm doing is now erasing them and, not doing anything. And I would have to take a lot of time to, shape this to where I was, satisfied with what the end result would be, whatever it may be, in things. And ultimately, I may not be happy with the end result when it's all said and done. So I went with the next best alternative. Now, I could spend hours on this, just tweaking this leaf, and going in and smoothing things out and stuff. you know, until I, you know, had something relatively decent that I was happy with. I'm not happy with this, of course. This is just showing you. I could go in and deposit material. That was way too much, right? Let's undo that. Control Z. Let's turn that strength down a bit. I could go in and start kind of bulking up some of the areas and everything. And once I got those areas bulked up, I could go back and again start kind of pulling and pushing that bulk into, you know, different areas and things until I was ultimately, you know, happy with the end result, right? You know, whatever it may be or wherever it may land. But for me, rather than spending hours and everything on it and all, I ultimately ended up looking for an alternative. There's a lot of different, I could have went to cgtrader.com, I could have went to Design and Make, I could have went online on eBay or Etsy and found, you know, Grapevine leaf model. You know, there's models of them everywhere, right? You know, it might be a model that I have to split. If I have Aspire, I could have split it if there's other things in there that I don't want. But in the Aspire software, there was already a leaf there that I could utilize. And so I took what I already had, didn't have to spend any extra money and all, and I took the tools that were available to me to cut out what I wanted and discard what I didn't, to ultimately end up with the leaf that I wanted, right? Which is this one here. Okay. Right? Right. All right. Let's answer another question and all. Mark says, can you use the smudge tool or sculpting tool on the leaf to give it texture? Yes. I think that's what we just did, right? Can you round off the edges? Yeah, that's the smoothing tool. You know, to round off the edges and all, that's the smoothing tool. So I could use in sculpting, like if I were sculpting this model here, in my smoothing tool, I could go in and kind of smooth off those edges and everything on the leaf. You know, so we can do that. All right, let's see here. Suicidal Times. You can sculpt the form, but texture you would have to add as an image or create a vector to add the texture additional. So yeah, we can sculpt and we can use the sculpt tool to create a texture, to create this pattern. This is basically just a bunch of, you know, smudging and smearing and removing material, depositing material, kind of building up some of the areas. We could create this from that leaf blank, you know, but it would take some time and things. And then, you know, as far as the veins and stuff, we could go in and add, you know, textured veins and stuff like that to it. Not through the sculpting tool, through the create shape tool and stuff. Let's see here. Is there a difference between deleted below a certain height as done versus lowering the base height while in the component setup? So if we lower the base height, all that does is it pushes the material down below the zero plane, and it's still there. The meat is still there. So we want to remove that material from underneath. If we just lower it in the properties tab, you know, lower the base height to a negative or whatever, that material, it's just basically, it's moving that model down, right? So it's going below the zero plane. That tool, the clear below zero plane tool, allows us to from a certain height down, we can say, okay, from here down, get rid of that, because, it lowers it into that zero plane, then it cleans it off. And we can clean it off with a transparency, or we could put a zero plane in there. I use the transparency because I don't want a zero plane in the model and stuff and everything. Okay. All right. So coming back to here, let's go ahead and turn our main vine back on and everything. And so now we have this leaf here. The leaf, one more time, let me come in here and pull it back just a little bit. Okay. And I could size it down or whatever the case may be, but I'm going to leave it at that size there. Now, the last component that we have is the grapes. Now, on the original vectors of the grapes, the shapes of those vector outlines, that tracing of the grapes, they look a little funky. Now, when trying to create a shape on them, let's go over into, let's turn off our vines and our leaf for a minute. And let's go into, let me see what component. Oh, I might have already deleted them. All right, let's create the shape just so you can see what our grapes look like. I'm going to select these vectors here, the grape vectors, and I'm going to go into the Create Shape tool. I want a 90-degree arch, no limit. I want them to merge with the other model, so I'll use Merge, and I'm going to click Apply. Now, based on those vectors and everything, if we look at the grapes, if we come in, they look a little funky, right? They look a little funky in those areas. I wouldn't want to eat these grapes, right? They don't look very appetizing. So these little nubs and bumps and everything sticking off them because of the way the vector was created, the trace and everything, I did not like the way that looked. So that prompted having to redraw the grapes. Basically, all I did with redrawing the grapes was take a circle tool, hover over the vectors, and sometimes I could find the center of the circle and then just draw out a new circle. And I made sure my new circle was just a little bit bigger than the others, than the original, and just go in and just start recreating those grapes, right? Redrawing them. And I wanted round shapes and stuff. So literally adding a new vector for each one of those. Okay. Now I put them on a different layer, and I had that layer color of red. So as I drew the grapes, I knew what color they were. So our new grapes, this red layer here, if I turn off the original layer, this was the new shapes that were created right here. Okay. Now when I go into the Create Shape tool on these, and I go with that 90-degree no limit merge and select the vectors first of all, and click Apply, I get a better looking set of grapes. Right. Now, I could have used the grapes that were in that Grapevine model that I cut and deleted. I actually could have used those because they were pretty decent. But I want my grapes to have a little bit of shape to them. And if we looked at the other grapes, let's turn this off. And let's go back into our clip art. Bear with me a second. And I drag this over here for a minute. These grapes were created by basically drawing some like soccer ball shape, you know, octagons or whatever, and then creating a little bit of a curved profile to them. So if I let that reset. If I tilt them to the side, you know, they've just got a very low amount of shape height to them and everything. And which is fine, because I'm going to lower my shape height a little bit as well, but I didn't want that much, and I didn't, you know, it kind of almost looked like a beehive the way, you know, these grapes were created. I wanted a little bit of roundness, a little bit of organicness and stuff, so I didn't use those grapes. So let's delete them out of there, and let's go back to our grapes here. And so on these grapes, get a little bit of organicness and everything, and the grapes are growing into each other and all that stuff. I am going to reduce the height some and its properties, the shape height. I'll bring this down to 0.75. Okay. And then now when I put everything together, our maple leaf, our vine, okay, and also there's a couple of other pieces missing, and don't worry about where the leaf is right here. We're going to fix that in just a minute, but let's go down to component number 8 and component number 10. Okay. Now I have this shape here, and my grapes are kind of, some of my grapes are behind that maple leaf. So what am I going to do? I'm going to fade. I'm going to fade that leaf into the grapes. Okay, so coming into here, I'm going to select my leaf. I'm going to click on the blue box at the bottom and open up the properties. I use the properties in the 3D view because it gives me the anchor and everything, and I can work in the 3D view with it. If I use the properties over here, I have to work in the 2D view with it, and I don't like necessarily working in the 2D view when I'm trying to determine which way I want to tilt and fade this. So I like working with the properties window in the 3D view. Okay. All right, so I'm going to fade this, and again, the first place you click is the area you want to keep, and then you're going to fade into the second place you click. So I'm going to click up here, and then I'm going to click down in this area, and it's going to fade at 50%. Now, the more I increase that percentage, the more my leaf starts to fade. Well, at some point, I'm going to fade so much that I'm actually, now my vine is starting to show through. So I need to be kind of, you know, selective. So I'm going to come to about 38% here, and I am going to deselect that, and I'm going to look at where I'm at here, and I'm going to be content with that. Now what I can do is I can do some space filling here, and I could add in a couple of more grapes, right, if I wanted to. Or I could just, you know, have it to where basically, you know, the grapes are, the leaf is behind the grapes, and you can see some of them and all. But this grape out here is kind of all at its lonesome, you know, out here by itself. So I may want to come in, and the reason why this one's on its lonesome by itself is because the other one is hidden by the leaf, and the little one that was right here is gone as well. So I may want to add in, if I use my circle tool, I could come in and add in a couple of fillers. Say here. Here. And let's see there. All right, this one is, that one is, where is that one at? 1, 2, and then, so 1, 2, and then right here. And on those 3 shapes, I could come into the Create Shape tool. I could add in another bit of grapes there. Again, we want it to be a merge, not an add. We want it to merge. And, you know, I could just keep filling in until all of my voids were, you know, pretty much gone if I wanted to. I just need to be mindful of, you know, I gotta kind of be respectful of realistically how the grapes would grow and things like that. I'm gonna be fine with this. I could move my circles in more and recreate the shape of the original grapes. I could just simply add a small amount of base height to the grapes, let's see, to here, because the other ones are hidden a little bit by there. So I could go into the properties and just give them a little bit of base height to bring them up some, you know. I could give them, you know, shape height, but again, I got to be mindful of, you know, what my shapes and stuff are going to be. And everything. And let's go ahead and on this last component, let's give that a little bit of base height as well. And, you know, I could start to, you know, fill that in a little bit if I wanted to in things. I think what I'm going to do is on that last set of grapes, let's turn those 3 off that I created. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep these, but I'm going to get rid of and delete this one right here. So if I select this component, my grape component here, I'm going to come in and first of all, let's delete, before I do that, let's delete these 3 circles, those 3 last circles I created, delete those. And if I come in here and select all of my red circles, and I'm going to do that by going up here where it says new grapes. I'm going to go in and select those vectors, right? Automatically using the layers. Just go over here and select all the vectors on that layer so it selects those. And I'm going to then hold down my shift key and select that model. And on here, I'm going to deselect this vector Now when I tell it to clear area outside of the selected components, it's going to clear everything except for what's right here. And that's fine, but I'm going to go into clear everything outside of the selected components. And it should just erase that one there. But it may also, I just noticed it deleted all of my overlaps, right? Can't have that. So let's undo that. And what I need to do is I need to weld these vectors together. I don't want to lose them, so I'm going to copy them to a new layer. And I'll call this my welded grapes vectors, welded grape vectors. We'll make it like a bright green. And turn off this layer for a minute. Let's select all the vectors that are on this layer. And I'm going to weld them together. So go into the drawing tools and weld. Not join, Laney. Weld. Okay. So I end up with, you know, my outline. Now I'm going to, because I want to get rid of these inside vectors and stuff, I just want the outside profile and everything. I'm going to hold down my shift key and turn off that outside profile. And everything else that's selected, I'm going to hit the delete key to get rid of. So all I have is this outside profile here. And on this outside profile, notice my grape is not in there anymore, right? That shape isn't in there anymore. And so now I can come in and select my grapes, select this vector, and clear everything outside of that selected vector. Hold on a minute. Select that. Select the vector and clear. And so I get rid of that grape that's out there. Now I have a little bit of the skin left that was right there. So I'm going to just fix the vector a little bit. I'm going to go into node editing. And I'm going to pull this arc down to right about here. And I'm going to do that again. So get out of node editing mode, select the component, clear the area outside of the selected vector, and, you know, clean that up. Okay, so now we end up with our finished piece, essentially, of that image. So let's go side by side here, and let's turn on our bitmap layer and zoom into it. So we have our grapevine and grapes, our little curly cues and everything to our image. The image on the right is great with all the vines and the veins and that texturing and stuff. We could probably go in and spend a little bit more time on this. And add maybe some of those veins, maybe at least the center vein and stuff. But we'd actually have to draw some new ones because these old ones were for the other leaf. We have a new leaf here, so we'd have to kind of follow the vectors. And I should be able to, if I wanted to do that, I should be able to, in here, select this model, go into the trace bitmap tool, and let's, before we do that, let's turn off everything else. Turn off the, oops, not that. That's what we need. Turn off that. Turn off that. This and this. Turn my leaf back on. And on here, if I go into the trace bitmap tool, I can, you know, adjust this somewhat. Not really. Yeah, I'm not going to get any real, you know, I'm not going to get any real good vector there. So I can't do that. So that's not an option. So it would be a matter of me taking and right-clicking on the model, going to Object Properties, turning the fading off so I can see the body here, and going in and drawing some of these veins in. Going in and drawing some of those veins in. Right? And then use the center rail sweep tool with a small little rounded profile to create the shape of those veins, if I wanted to do that. But I don't. And so once again, let's turn on oh, not that one. Turn on our grapes, our vine, component 10 and 8. And that completes that, guys and girls. Okay. All right. So let's go back and let's look at yeah, so Suicide All Time says you could trace the boundary of the leaf. I don't need to trace it. I can use the trace tool to do that for that model. I can create that outline and then have it to clear the inside the vector on the grape component, right? So to get rid of the grapes, but I want the leaf under the grapes. Suicide at All Times. I don't want the leaf over the grapes. I want it under. So I want those grapes there. But what he's referring to is I can take the leaf component. Let's go back over here. Let's turn on a new layer here. Let's turn off the bitmap layer. Add a new layer. Bear with me, there's another layer on somewhere. Oh no, it's on that one. Okay, let me move this real quick. Move to leaf vector. Okay, I could take my leaf here and use the trace boundary tool to create a vector boundary around that model. I could select that vector boundary there, and then with that boundary selected, make sure we select the boundary. And then the grapes, and I could clear everything inside that selected vector. That would get rid of the grapes, and the leaf would be over the grapes, like you see there. Okay, and so, but what it does is it cuts the grapes off, like this here, so it literally just cut them away. And now I would need to maybe do some fading so the grapes start to disappear into that leaf, or do some tilting to raise this end up some. But I would need a little bit better look than my grapes just being cut off right there, right? And so we'd have to do a little bit of fading to fade these down and away into the leaf, or raise this side of the leaf up by doing a little tilting in that direction. But I've already got tilt on this to tilt this up, so I can't do two different tilts, right? And stuff. But I don't want that. I'm going to undo that because I want the leaf to go behind the grapes in this particular instance. And all. I want to somewhat simulate this image here where the leaf is going behind the grapes. Right? And then let's see here. Donald, Laney, you are fantastic. Thank you. After I watched this several times, I might be able to start to understand. I can just say, wow. Well, thanks, Donald. I appreciate that. You know, I was a little disappointed in what I did last week with getting the vectors and all drawn. I mean, it ultimately ended us up here. But I was hoping in 3 hours that I would be able to get a lot farther along. And at the end of that last week's video, I didn't end up with the result that I wanted on the loop-de-loop. So we kind of ended that video where it wasn't like okay, that's a good place to stop. End of the video was like, oh man, it didn't do right. So we're going to have to try to figure it out next week kind of thing. Well, I've explained to you what I had to do, cutting those center lines to create those sweeps and stuff. At the beginning of this class, but I didn't want to spend or waste that time doing it, so I figured it out off screen and everything so I could explain it and just kind of walk you through what happened, and we recreated the model anyway and stuff and all to end up with this result. I was a little disappointed that I could not, if I spent a few hours on that original leaf that I created, the original leaf outline, I could probably get something that I would be happy with, something similar to this. But why not use what you have if you have it? And that was it was a model that was in the Aspire already, so I could just cut that leaf free and, you know, put it together. My goal was to take an image that I imported and make a model out of it that emulated that image, and this model does. So I'm happy with the end results, and I hope you guys and girls are too, and I hope you did learn something from this. And also, but I do appreciate that, Donald, those positive words. I appreciate all of you guys and girls and your commentary, your positive words, your questions, and all that stuff. The stem is missing on the top of the leaf. Right. Harvey said the stem is missing on the top of the leaf. So we can go ahead and draw that stem in. Give me a second, we'll do that, Harvey. Perhaps better to use transparent stains, right? This would look good colored and painted green and brown and, you know, whatever color the grapes are, purple or green, whatever the color you want them. So yeah, it would look nice as a painted design. Somebody said that. Who? Laney, this would look awesome painted. Bear with me. Somebody said that up above. Pre-stain. Who the heck said that? Where'd you guys? I saw that. You could trace that. Thumbs up, please. Yes, give me a thumbs up. One of you guys and girls said. Somewhere I saw, Laney, this would look great painted. But anyway, it would look good as a, you know, a painted model or whatever, or as an emblem, you know, in a dish or something in another model and things like that. So there's a lot of different things that we could do. So we could take, you know, on this, I could take and come in and draw a, you know, a circle here. I could go into the, make sure I'm in the right level. I could create a shape, go with a, let's say a 60-degree dome, but I want it to be a dish, a subtract. And click apply. And of course I would have to fix it a little bit because my other two models aren't in there. 60 is a little bit much. Let's go 30 and click apply. Oh, it would help if I actually typed in 30. 30 and click apply. And let's get those other two parts in where they belong. So component 8 and component 10, I'm going to hold the control key down and select them. And I'm going to go ahead and move them up into the active level here. So they'll blend back in there. And so I could create a dish with that. I could create all kinds of, all kinds of things. I could just have it as the model and it's not in the dish. So if I added a zero plane to this so you can get the effect of the dish effect. So I could have this model in a dish. Let's go full screen here. And everything, in the dish if I wanted to. If I wanted to add this model to another, a plaque or what have you, a lot of things that we could do with that. With that component. All right, let's come back up here, split the view for a minute, and let's talk about the stem. So Harvey Martel, and this will be our final thing. The stem is missing on the top of the leaf. So basically, this stem here should technically kind of be blending into right about here, the vein, and everything. So that stem and everything. So let's go into our drawing really quickly. And let's go back into our that's the leaf, centerline. Let's take this center line here and I'm going to go into node editing. I'm going to cut the vector right here. I'm going to extend this vector out a bit to right about, let's say here. While I'm in node editing, I'm going to turn this into it already is a Bezier curve. So I'm going to kind of pull it and give it a little bit of a kind of a curve here. Let's pull this back a bit. About like that. And so on that vector there, we will use one of our profiles. And we need it to really be the profile that we used at the end of this to begin with. So we're going to go with our Centerline sweep tool. We'll use that profile here. And notice the direction that it's going. I want to reverse it. I want it to come from this way into here. And what I'd like to do is we ended this with this shape right here, or we started that one with that shape there. So that'll be where we start here. And I want to end. I'm actually going to go into node editing. All right, bear with me. Close this tool for a minute. Let me take this shape, come over here, and undo. Control key, move over a copy, and I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. In size, kind of flatten it out. All right, one more time, Centerline sweep tool. Let's go over here and grab this vector. That's going to be our drive rail, and we're going to use this vector here. We're going to start it there. We'll use this one to end it here. We'll go ahead and sweep it between the spans. We're not going to do a weave because it doesn't need to be a weave. There's no weave there. And we're going to click apply. Okay. And on that shape here, it's going to be a merge. So it's going to merge with that and click close. We're going to, on that merge, we're going to do a, on this component, we're going to do a tilt and fade. Let me do it in the 3D view here. Going to do a tilt. This is going to be the thin part of the wedge. This is going to be the thicker part of the wedge here. I'm going to tilt that up just a little bit. Let's go a little bit more. Okay, and then finally we're going to take that component. I'm going to insert a new level because I need this component here and my leaf, as well as this component, those three things. I'm going to hold down the control key. I want to keep them separate, you know, in case I ever need to change, but I am going to hold the control key down and drag a copy up here. I'm going to turn off the originals, all of them, because I only want those three items showing when I bake them together. I don't want to bake anything together unless I want to bake it together, right? And I don't want this to be baked together in case I want to change something. On these three remaining items here, we're going to go ahead and bake those together into one. Go into full 3D screen view here. We're going to go into the, with it selected, we're going to go into the sculpting tool. We'll start off with the smooth tool, and just up here at this vein, we're going to go ahead and smooth out where the two blended together. And then with the smudge tool, I'm going to take this one here and I'm going to just kind of pull it into this leaf. In the different directions it may go. And then I'm going to ultimately come back with the smoothing tool and kind of bring everything to a little bit of a more of a smooth blend. And let's see. Not happy with that, so I'm going to undo that sculpting. Let's go back into sculpting. All right, let's twiddle the view, and I want to look at it from the top down here. I want to look at it in this direction so I can see what I'm doing a little better. Once again, with the smoothing tool, just on this seam, we're just going to smooth that out, clean up that seam. We're going to take our smudge tool here, and I'm going to reduce the power or the strength a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of blend this in. And then I'm going to use the remove tool to kind of, oops, not the remove tool, sorry, undo. Undo that. Let's smudge that back. Let me twiddle the view and back up a little bit. All right, let's do a bit of the remove. Oh, too strong. Control Z to undo. Let's turn that strength down quite a bit. And I want to work my way. That's a little bit too little. Oh, Lordy be, Lordy be. And of course, I hit cancel instead of OK because I am just that much of an idiot. Let's do that one more time. Always hit OK, not cancel. One more time, very quickly. Lord have mercy. Should be a master at this one by now. All right, smooth tool. Let's smooth out that seam. Smudge tool. Let's kind of pull this out a little bit. Widen it up a little bit. And then let's smooth and blend. And twiddle our view. Okay. Click OK. And then come back in here and turn on our other models, making sure that this model is set to, or this level, that new level that baked component is on, is set to merge. I can come back in now and turn on the 8 and 10. The component 15. Oh, not component 15, sorry. Component 14. Nope. Damn, it's not 14 either. Hold on a minute. It's 13. It's either 13 or 12. Nope, it's 12. I knew it was one of those. All right, and 12. Okay. So going back into our split view again. You know, we have our stem. Could probably clean that stem up a little bit more right in here, but I'm going to call that done. Okay. All right, let's see here. Bear with me a second. Live and learn. Stem is missing at the top. We did that already. Better use with stain. Large. Depends on the type. Always learn. How long is it going to take to carve, Laney? Good question. Let's find out. Let's create some toolpaths on it. I'm impressed when I grow up. Be like you. Thanks for your time to put into this. No problem. You're welcome, Donald. Donald said when he grows up, he wants to be like me. That's funny. Let's see here. Let me make sure. Just an FYI, if anyone hasn't set up a meet with Lainey for help, if needed, so worth explains things really well. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. Mark's referring to the one-on-one training. Okay, let's go ahead and let's create a tool path on this. Let's see. Do we want to do this as a kind of a plaque where we carve down the material where that's raised, or do we want to do it as a bowl, like in a tray? Let's do it as a plaque. So let's take our model. Let's select that component. And hold down our shift key, or control key, and let's select this component, and this component. Wonderful. Let's double click on it in here. Oh, you son of a gun. You son of a gun. Bear with me. Get everything selected. Okay. Let's size this up a little bit. That's good. Okay, so this project, just to go back to the beginning, this project is 24 inches by 24 inches. Quite big, right? So it's a large project, 24 by 24. So let's go over here. I'm going to go into the material setup. I'm going to make sure my model is at the top of the material. I am going to skim off an extra 10 thousandths off the top so I don't get any flat spots in the model. So I will put a gap above model of 10 thousandths of an inch. The model's pretty thick. It's about 1.2 inches right now in its overall entirety. In its entirety. Because of the grapes and all that wonderful jazz. I'm going to scale the model down to height. I want to just give myself a little bit more meat at the base. So I'm going to scale the model down to 3/4. Making sure now, I got to be careful I don't lose too much detail in my leaf when I do that. Did lose a little bit of detail, but I just wanted some meat behind the base because I'm not doing this in a dish or anything. All right, let's click OK. Let's go over to here and create a, first of all, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to turn off every layer that is currently on here right now. I want an empty board. Like this. Bear with me. All right, let's select this, hold down the control key, component 12, 10, and 8. I'm going to use the create vector boundary around the selected components to create this vector boundary here. I'm going to use a rectangle tool and create a vector boundary around my rectangle. I'm going to offset that rectangle boundary outward about 1/16 of an inch. I'm going to select all of these vectors here, and I'm going to create a pocket cut. And the reason why I'm creating a pocket cut is because I don't need my small ball nose bit trying to do all this flat work and everything. My model Z-plane is 0.75 inches, so that's how deep my pocket cut needs to be. So I'm going to go with a pocket cut 0.75. I'll use a 1/4 inch end mill will be fine. Let's do this. It's doing it in 1/8 inch passes. That's fine as well. We'll do it as a raster cut with a profile pass last. We'll calculate that toolpath. Hold on a minute. Let's redo that. Deselect that guy and recalculate that. Okay. What that will do is, let's go into full 3D view here. What that will do is that'll go ahead and let the end mill mill that pocket down so the 3D bit, my 3D rough cut and 3D finish cut can just focus on the model. Okay. Now, okay. Now I can deselect this outside vector and just have this vector selected right here. And I'm going to ungroup this selected vector, and I just want this outside boundary. Just that outside boundary selected, nothing on the inside. I'm going to create a 3D rough cut. I'm going to use the selected vector as the boundary. And I'm going to do a Z-level raster along the x-axis. We'll go ahead and calculate that. So the rough cut will just focus on rough cutting that model. So Blue Knight has a bet that it's about 12 hours long. Let's find out. All right, so now again with the same selected vector of the outside boundary, we're going to do the 3D finish cut. On the 3D finish, I will use a 1/8 inch tapered ball nose because it doesn't need to be a 1/16. There's not that much detail in it. So I'll use an 1/8 inch tapered ball nose. Again, the selected vector is the boundary. However, I am going to let the boundary, let me look at my 3D, let me look at my 3D view real quick one more time. Okay, I will let the 3D finish cut have a boundary offset of about the same diameter as the bit, so 1/8 of an inch. So it'll blend in with this pocket out here and stuff and inside. We'll go ahead and, again, doing a raster cut along the x-axis. We'll calculate that. Mark says 15 hours. I'm going to say 7.5 hours on this. The pocket cut will be a couple of hours. The 3D rough cut will be a couple of minutes, a few minutes, and then the 3D finish cut will be a couple hours. So I'm going to say, I'll say 7.5 hours. All right, so we'll have our 3D finish cut. Let's preview that toolpath there. Let it preview, and then this is going to be the end for us, guys. Once we figure out the time, we're going to say our good nights and goodbyes. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you got something out of it. and all. And by the way, I traced that, I created the vector boundaries around that model so I could put the rectangle around there so I could do a pocket cut. A 2D pocket cut is going to be much faster than my 3D finish cut trying to flatten out all of that flat area. Let the pocket cut bring it down to the finish cut, and then your 3D rough cut and your 3D finish cut can just focus on the 3D model and everything. And so this is kind of a result. I'd love to have a little bit more depth or detail in the leaf. I could probably work on that a little bit to get that shape height a little bit higher and still have some meat on the board, on this 1.5-inch board that was cut. But let's go ahead and look at the times. We'll check off those 3 tool paths. And based on my tools and my settings and my machine, the estimated run time comes in, we were all wrong, at 25 hours and 20 minutes. So 8 hours for the pocket cut, 4 hours for the 3D rough cut, and 12 hours and 32 minutes for the 3D finish cut for a 24-inch by 24-inch board, running the speeds that my bits run. So 25 hours and 20 minutes. So we were all wrong. Now on a commercial line unit that can run, 400, 500, 600 inches a minute, you can increase that or decrease that time dramatically. On our mid-size hobby units, I have a digital woodcarver 2440. So where maximum I'm running my bits, they're running around 55, 65 inches a minute. So with that, it takes time. And the pocket cut. So the pocket cut helped out tremendously. All right, everybody. Yeah, Blue Knight, that's a long time. Yeah. Oh, the finish cut is the finish cut is 12 hours. The 3D finish cut is 12 hours. The rough cut is 8 hours or 4 hours, and then the pocket cut is 25. Now let's look at the 3D rough cut for a minute, and let's look at the actual tool. So it's taking 1/8 of an inch per pass. It is running around 55 inches a minute. I could increase that speed. I could, safely run that probably about 65 or 75 inches a minute at 1/8 of an inch pass pretty easily. I'm pretty conservative. I don't like building up a lot of heat on my bits and stuff. But I could kind of increase that speed and bring that time down a little bit. The 3D finish cut is running, it's taking an 8% step over, really fine step over, so I don't have to do any sanding hardly when it's all done. It is also running about 55 inches a minute, and it does one full pass. It doesn't take steps or passes or anything. I could probably increase that up to about 65 or 70, but then I'd have a little bit of cleanup, a little bit of touch up I'd have to do with a wire brush or some sanding and stuff. At these speeds and all, it's going to be a good, nice, clean cut for me, so I don't have to do a lot of cleanup. All right, everybody. With that being said, let's go back into a split view here. Turn that layer off. And so that would be our finish cut. Again, I'd like probably a little bit more detail in the leaf. Could probably work on that, give it a little bit more body and detail. When I sized it down from the 1.2 inches thick that it was to the 3/4 of an inch thick, well, with that Z scaling, you lose detail in that. So I lost some detail in the leaf. I'd probably pump up the leaf a little bit more, go into my shape tools and build it up a little bit so it stands a little bit on the shape height. But either that or just cut it at 1.2 inches thick, right? So that's our look. And If we close the preview, this was our model that we created. And on that model height, like I said, if I went back in and changed that model height back to the 1.2 inches that it was, give it a second. I could gain some of the detail back in my leaf and everything. Just all depends, you know. All right, everybody. Thanks for your, sorry, I didn't mean to clap in the microphone, but I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something out of it. I appreciate you spending another 2 hours and 45 minutes with me today. So that was my challenge for myself. Every once in a while, I like to challenge myself when it comes to making models and all. This one, especially the leaf. The leaf was the biggest challenge for me. I ended up having to use an alternative option rather than a leaf from the vectors that were created. But I'm okay. One way or another, I got to from point A to point B. Most likely, I will probably go back in to enhance my skills. I probably will take that original leaf model that was created, bring it into the sculpting tool, and just start playing with the sculpting tool and seeing if I can create something that I'm happy with. You know, giving it some texture and everything. Again, that's just how I keep my skills up. That's how I challenge myself. And I ended up with a model that I can use and all. And each of you are going to get this model. I'm going to make this STL model file available in the description of the video. So you'll be able to download the model. I'm going to clean it up, and I will create 2 models, this as it is, and then the same model in a dish, a little 30-degree dish for you. Those 2 models will be downloadable in the description of the video. Give me a couple of hours and it'll be up in there. All right, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Y'all have a wonderful day. See you next time.